were never meant to die. That's the first big lie they taught you before you even had a chance to question it. You were made to believe that this life, this short time you have wrapped in skin and bone, is all there is. That once your body breaks down, your story is over. That death is final, and anything beyond it is just fantasy, faith, or fear. But what if that's not true? What if the real truth was hidden from you? Not because it was lost, but because it was too powerful to be handed over. Ancient cultures didn't fear death. They understood it deeply. They studied it, went beyond it, and encoded what they learned into the buildings, symbols, and writings that still exist today. Places like Atlantis and the Emerald Tablets aren't just myths. They're leftovers from a forgotten science, a guide to immortality that's been buried under centuries of lies. Now, it's time to uncover that truth. Long before recorded history, before the first empires, even before the pyramids cast their shadows on the desert, there was a civilization with knowledge so advanced it's hard to imagine. Atlantis wasn't just a mythic city. It was a center of spiritual science. The Atlanteans didn't just build temples, they built structures designed to work with human consciousness itself. They didn't guess about the afterlife. They mapped it out. They didn't worship gods out of fear. They worked with universal laws to master life beyond the body. Atlantean wisdom wasn't based on superstition. It was precise, organized, and only shared with those ready to handle it. These weren't stories told around campfires. They were encoded truths passed through sacred geometry, crystal vibrations, and symbolic language. The top Atlanteans believed immortality wasn't just a dream. It was a skill. To them, death wasn't an end. It was a thin veil you could cross with full awareness. They trained to leave their bodies consciously, to remember past lives, and to choose their reincarnations on purpose. The problem wasn't that this knowledge was lost. It was hidden on purpose. When Atlantis fell, whether through disaster or sabotage, its leaders scattered and hid pieces of their wisdom in the earth itself. That's why we see the same symbols in cultures oceans apart. That's why pyramids rise in Egypt, Mesoamerica, and even China. These weren't tombs. They were libraries carved in stone. Places meant to change consciousness, activate energy, and open people to deathless awareness. Ask yourself, why has mainstream history worked so hard to call Atlantis a myth? Why do people who talk about Thoth, Hermeticism, or vibrational healing get mocked? Because once you realize death is just a transition, not an end, fear loses its hold on you. And fear is the leash that keeps modern society in line. When you understand you're not just your body, that your consciousness survives death and can grow beyond it, the systems built on control start to fall apart. You stop living in fear. You stop following blindly. You stop accepting the limits they set for you. Some of the deepest teachings about vibrational immortality are too controversial to share openly. But if you want, you can join our free newsletter, Insights Academy, and get the Kabbalion ebook for a limited time. The Atlanteans weren't just stone builders, they were builders of the soul. They lived in harmony with natural rhythms, using sound, light, and intention to raise consciousness beyond decay. They saw the body as a temple, yes, but also as a tool, a temporary vessel for the soul's eternal journey. And they left us a blueprint hidden in symbols, myths, and structures that modern science still struggles to understand. The fall of Atlantis didn't end this wisdom. It just went underground, into secret societies, hidden texts, and the memory of the soul. You carry echoes of it in your intuition, in moments when you feel there's something more, something ancient you once knew but can't fully remember. That's not imagination. It's remembrance. You were taught to see death as an ending. The Atlanteans saw it as a doorway. And if you can remember what they knew, if you can lift the veil and see their blueprint, then maybe death isn't something to fear. Maybe it's something you can master. One name stands out in this ancient wisdom: Thoth. To some he was a god, to others, a man. But those who study his teachings know him as something greater, an immortal intelligence who walked among humans, mastered death's illusion, and left a guide for those ready to break free from rebirth. Thoth wasn't tied to one name or form. In Egypt, he was the god of writing and wisdom. In Greece, he became Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great. In secret texts of mystics and magicians, he is the architect of sacred laws governing not just the physical world, but the realms beyond. His legacy isn't myth, it's mastery. The emerald tablets attributed to Thoth aren't religious stories or moral lessons. They're coded instructions, guides for the soul's journey through time, space, and transformation. Thoth said he lived for thousands of years, moving through different lives by choice, not chance. He talked about stepping out of the body like changing clothes, traveling between worlds, and returning to guide humanity again and again. These aren't the ramblings of a crazy man. They're the words of someone who understood life's deeper workings. In his writings, Thoth doesn't ask for worship. He asks for understanding. He doesn't speak about salvation. He speaks about aligning with frequency, with law, with the divine structure behind everything. To him, immortality isn't about holding on to life. It's about going beyond the illusion of death completely. He said, "Man is a flame trapped on a mountain, but that flame can rise. You are not your body. You are not your name. You are awareness temporarily wrapped in form. And once you realize that, death loses its power over you." Thoth laid out 7 laws, now called the Hermetic Principles, that form the foundation of reality itself: mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. This isn't just some philosophical fluff. These are real tools. Once you truly understand them, they start to lift the veil between what you can see and what you can't. When you master the law of vibration, especially, you begin to feel what the Atlanteans knew all along. Your frequency shapes your reality. Your level of awareness and your ability to move between different states of existence raise your frequency, and death becomes a door, not a wall. But here's what modern society has done. It's turned Thoth's wisdom into trivia. His symbols are slapped on fashion items. His name gets reduced to Instagram quotes, and his teachings get dismissed by scholars who've never even read him. This isn't by accident. When truth becomes just a trend, it loses its power. That's the point. Keep the truth right out in the open, but bury it under so much noise that no one notices. The Emerald Tablets weren't written for casual readers or the spiritually curious. They were for initiates, those ready to stop believing and start knowing. Imagine for a second that everything you've been taught about death is wrong. That the soul isn't judged or erased, but simply moves on, guided by what it remembers and what it still needs to learn. Imagine you could move with purpose, not just drift. Imagine you could choose when or if you return. That's the reality. There's no heaven or hell, no reward or punishment, just consciousness evolving, choosing, remembering. And that changes everything. Because once you realize you're more than just flesh, that you've lived before and will live again, not by fate, but by design, you start taking life more seriously. You live with purpose. You ask deeper questions. What am I here to remember? What part of the great law am I here to master? And most importantly, how can I break free from the endless cycle and step into eternity? Thoth never said the path would be easy, but he said it is possible. For those who seek, not with blind faith, but with focused awareness, the journey doesn't end at death. It begins there. If Thoth taught one thing above all, it was this: everything is vibration. The universe isn't made of solid stuff. It's made of frequency. The world around you, your thoughts, your feelings, they're all patterns of vibration. When Thoth said, "As above, so below, as within, so without," He wasn't just being poetic. He was giving you the key to how reality works. Once you understand everything is energy vibrating at different speeds, you start to see death not as an end but as a change in frequency. You've been trained to see your body as solid, your life as a straight line, and death as final. But that's an illusion, a trick of low-level awareness. Science already knows nothing is truly solid. Matter is just energy shaped into forms we can interact with. What you see as physical is really your consciousness interacting with certain vibrations. Change the frequency, and the form changes or disappears. This isn't mysticism, it's quantum physics. Thoth knew this long before science named it. He talked about moving through dimensions, tapping into the unseen flame of life, and stepping beyond time by tuning into higher vibrations. He didn't fear death because he knew how to move beyond it. Not by avoiding it, but by raising his consciousness past its reach. Like tuning a radio from one station to another, he moved between planes by changing his frequency. Imagine your consciousness is a unique song, with its own rhythm and tone. Now imagine that song isn't stuck repeating in this physical world, but can play in infinite versions across time and space. The only thing stopping you from reaching higher realms is your ability to tune into them. That's what Thoth meant when he said immortality belongs to those who raise their vibration. Immortality isn't about the body living forever. It's your true self rising to a place where death has no power. This isn't abstract philosophy. It's practical and real. You raise your frequency by what you think, feel, consume, create, and believe. Your choices. What you watch, what you say, what you accept, either trap you in low vibrations or lift you into higher ones. Even the food you eat has a frequency. The music you listen to, the people you spend time with, the places you go, everything either raises or lowers your vibration. Most people unknowingly live tuned into fear, anger, distraction, and ego. The frequency of decay, the frequency of death. But when you shift your focus to love, truth, calm, and inner knowing, you start to rise. That's when real change begins. Not all at once, not with one meditation, but slowly and powerfully. You become less reactive. You start to see through manipulation. You feel energy differently. You dream clearer. You notice when something's off or when something is pulling you forward. That's not just a spiritual side effect. It's a frequency shift. And when that shift sticks, your soul remembers how to move beyond this world's limits. Thoth didn't just talk about this. He built it into all his teachings. The 7 Hermetic principles are laws of vibration. The emerald tablets are maps of vibration. Ancient symbols like the Ankh, the eye, and the spiral are keys meant to awaken your subconscious. They're not decorations. They're tools to raise your awareness. But modern life keeps you vibrating low. Stress, processed food, non-stop screens, fear-based news, social pressure. All of it is designed to keep you stuck in survival mode. Because someone vibrating in fear is easy to control. But someone vibrating in awareness? They're a threat to the system. When you're no longer afraid of death, you're no longer afraid to live. You take risks. You speak your truth. You walk your own path. You step out of conformity and into conscious creation. That's what real immortality means. Not living forever in a body that breaks down, but rising to a state where your true self can't be touched. That's what Thoth mastered, and what you've been kept from remembering. Because once you do, you're no longer a cog in someone else's machine. You become the creator of your own reality. You've been taught to fear death because you were taught to believe you are your body. From the moment you're born, everything around you pushes the idea that the physical is all that's real. Your worth gets tied to how you look, what you own, and how much time you have left. Life feels like a countdown. But the truth? Your body isn't who you are. It's your interface. The suit you wear here, a tool for experience, but not the whole story. Take away your skin, bones, brain, even your name. What's left is consciousness, awareness, energy. And energy doesn't die. It changes form. Thoth understood this thousands of years ago, and he wasn't alone. Mystery schools in Egypt, Greece, and early Asia all pointed to the same truth. The soul is eternal. It's light shaped into form. When the form fades, the light keeps going. It carries your memories, your intentions, your growth. You don't just disappear when you die. You shift, like steam turning into mist. Your essence leaves the body and moves beyond the physical. The only question is, are you doing this consciously? That's what separates those who are awake from those still wandering. Most people pass away confused, still holding onto their identities, regrets, and unfinished desires. Because of that, they keep drifting in low energy levels, living lifetime after lifetime without remembering, repeating the same lessons until something finally breaks through. But those who follow the path of remembering, who raise their energy and live in tune with deeper truths, they move with clear purpose. They leave their bodies behind like an old coat and cross into the next stage fully aware of who they are and why they're here. That's what Thoth did. That's what the initiates trained for. And that's what most people were never meant to know. Today's culture has sanitized death, turning it into something clinical, hidden behind hospital doors and quiet grieving. But ancient people saw it differently. Death wasn't the end. It was a kind of initiation, a test of energy frequency. If your vibration matched the higher realms, you would rise up. If not, you came back, not as punishment, but because you needed more growth. The soul isn't judged the way we've been told. It judges itself. It knows when it's ready to move on and when it isn't. And the soul is honest, brutally so. That's why pretending to be spiritual doesn't work. You can fake it with words, but not with your energy. The soul records everything. And when the body dies, the soul is all that's left. You've probably felt this, even if you couldn't explain it. That feeling that you're more than just what you see in the mirror. The sense that your life didn't start at your first breath. Dreams that feel like memories. Instincts that don't make sense. Pain you carry that didn't start in this life. These are echoes of your true, eternal self. You don't remember because you were taught not to, but memory lives in vibration. Raise your frequency, and you start to remember. The soul doesn't measure time in years. It measures growth, alignment, and balance. When you hide your truth, it slows down. When you live in alignment, it grows. You've been taught to value productivity, but your soul values being present. You've been told to chase security, but your soul thrives on change, and you've been taught to fear the unknown, but your soul was born from it. The thing you fear most, death, is something your soul already understands. Thoth said death is like a mirror. It shows you who you really are. If you've spent life identifying with the outside, death feels like loss. But if you've built your life around your inner self, death feels like coming home, not disappearing, but returning. The truth is, bodies always break down. That's just how physical things work. But the soul is fire. It only goes out if you forget how to keep it alive. So don't let anyone tell you death is your enemy. Don't let them reduce your life to just dates on a certificate or a spot in the ground. You are energy, eternal, smart, and always growing. The moment you stop living like a body with a soul and start living like a soul with a body, everything changes. We've been told the pyramids were tombs built by slaves for kings obsessed with their legacy. But that's not true. No bodies have ever been found inside the Great Pyramid of Giza. No tomb decorations or sarcophagi like in other burial sites. Just perfect shapes, geometry, and a quiet power louder than any textbook explanation. Because the pyramids weren't built for death, they were built for awakening. These structures weren't made to honor the dead. They were made for the living, people ready to rise beyond the limits of the physical body. The Great Pyramid isn't just an architectural wonder. It's a tool for raising vibration. Its size follows the golden ratio. It's aligned with the stars with incredible precision. The materials, angles, and chambers all form a system that activates energy. This wasn't guesswork. It was spiritual engineering. Thoth, often credited with designing the pyramids, knew architecture was about frequency, not just shelter. The pyramid's chambers represent the stages of a spiritual journey. The dark, narrow descending passage stands for going deep into the unconscious, letting go of false identity. The queen's chamber represents the heart, the center of intuitive wisdom. The king's chamber, perfectly tuned to Earth's frequency, is where transformation happens, where body, mind, and spirit align for a rebirth. Initiates didn't enter the pyramid to die. They entered to remember. They fasted, meditated, chanted, and aligned their bodies with the pyramid's geometry to lift their consciousness. This wasn't symbolic. It was real. The pyramid was a tool, like a tuning fork, a mirror, or a doorway. Used correctly, it could raise the soul to higher awareness beyond physical limits. What they built wasn't a monument. It was a portal of frequency. That's why its real purpose has been hidden under myths and lies. Because if people knew they could raise their vibration and reach higher states on their own, without priests, temples, or rules, they'd stop obeying. They'd stop fearing death. They'd stop just surviving and start remembering they were born to rise above. That's dangerous knowledge. It threatens systems that profit from keeping you limited. Look closer at where the pyramid sits. It's at the center of Earth's landmass. Its height multiplied by a specific number equals Earth's polar radius. Its base encodes the speed of light. These aren't accidents. They're messages carved in stone, waiting for those ready to listen. It's not just a building. It's a code pointing to a science about consciousness, not bricks. And this code isn't just in Giza. Similar pyramids show up around the world. The stepped pyramids of Mesoamerica, the mounds in North America, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia. They all share shapes, energy, and alignments to stars and seasons. What we call myths are just pieces of a bigger truth. A truth whispered across continents by those who remembered. But today, most people walk past these sites without noticing, eyes glazed over, deaf to the power beneath their feet. Because they've been told these are just old relics, not tools. History, not keys. But what if you remembered their purpose? What if, instead of just admiring ancient genius, you asked yourself, what happens if I tune into this code? The answer isn't found in books or documentaries. It's found in vibration, in silence, in the quiet space between your thoughts, in your breath as it matches the Earth's pulse. When you learn to listen like the initiates did, when you stop seeing pyramids as stone and start feeling them, you realize they weren't just built from rock. They were built from intention. Intention is everything. You don't have to go all the way to Giza to remember who you really are. What was once carved in stone was meant to be awakened inside your spirit. The pyramid isn't just a shape. It's a symbol of your own growth, rooted in the physical but reaching toward the sky. When you rise like that, you're not chasing immortality. You're remembering it was always inside you. If this knowledge is so powerful and life-changing, why don't we learn about it in school? Why aren't the emerald tablets part of philosophy classes? Why are pyramids still called tombs when the facts say otherwise? Because the truth hasn't been lost. It's been hidden on purpose, not gone, but locked away right in front of us, hidden behind polished history, organized religion, and academic rules. That's because a people who remember they are immortal can't be controlled. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. Across education, religion, media, and science, the same story shows up. They don't want you asking certain questions. They want you to believe the physical world is all there is, that you're just a body. Life is a struggle, and death is the end. Why? Because fear makes people obedient. It makes them chase comfort instead of truth. It keeps them small. A soul afraid of death clings to authority. A soul that remembers its eternity can't be controlled. For centuries, the teachings of Thoth and the secrets of Atlantis were kept in mystery schools, passed down by initiates, hidden in symbols and stories. Not because the knowledge itself was dangerous, but because the world had become dangerous for those who held it. Empires stayed powerful by keeping people spiritually blind. The church silenced mystics. Scholars mocked hidden knowledge. Secret groups were hunted and corrupted. Generation after generation, the flame of immortality dimmed, but it never went out. It survived in bits and pieces, symbols above cathedral doors, misunderstood stories, rituals quietly shared by those who remembered. Even today, traces remain, though watered down and scattered. You see it in yoga, once a path to enlightenment, now a fashion industry. You see it in meditation apps that offer calm, but not freedom. The sacred has been packaged and sold, stripped of its power. When truth becomes a product, its fire is taken away. But the system still isn't satisfied. Institutions that control what you believe work hard to silence anything that challenges their power. Talk about Atlantis and you're called a dreamer. Mention vibrational consciousness and you're labeled pseudoscience. But those labels are just cheap walls. If you read between the lines, if you listen not to what they say, but to what they avoid, that's where the real story starts. A story of a humanity that once knew how to rise above death and was told to forget. The control goes beyond information. It affects how you live, think, and dream. You're taught to mock ancient wisdom and blindly trust systems that profit from your fear. You're encouraged to worship technology, not your intuition. To measure success by numbers, not by how aligned you feel. To fear aging, not honor it as preparation for something greater. This isn't evolution, it's control, and it's been perfected over generations. But cracks are showing. People are waking up, not because they were told to, but because they're remembering. Something deep inside is stirring, asking questions louder than the answers they've been given. Something ancient, something sacred, something Atlantean. Once that spark lights up, the system starts to lose its grip, because one awakened soul can inspire thousands still asleep. If you've ever felt like you don't fit in this world, like you carry a memory you can't explain, like you're meant for more than just getting by until you die, that's not a glitch. It's your soul pushing back against the program. Truth doesn't need to be taught, it needs to be remembered. The emerald flame still burns, the path is still open, but only if you're ready to leave behind what kept you comfortable in the dark. This isn't about rejecting science or logic. It's about combining what the ancients knew with what we're rediscovering today. Consciousness is the last frontier, not outer space, not AI. You are the technology. You are the code. And the sooner you see that, the sooner the veil starts to lift. So ask yourself, who benefits when you forget who you are? And who do you become when you finally remember? You were never meant to be ordinary. You weren't born to live someone else's life, follow someone else's rules, or believe someone else's story. Deep down, you've always known this. The quiet pull inside you, the feeling that you're here for more. It's not wishful thinking. It's your soul remembering the path of the initiate. The ancient way meant not for everyone, but for those ready to remember what most have forgotten. You're not just human. You're a divine intelligence having a human experience. The teachings of Thoth, Atlantis, and every real spiritual tradition all say the same thing. Immortality isn't a place you reach. It's a state of being. It's not about avoiding death. It's about stepping beyond it while still alive. Initiates don't wait for death to show them what's real. They prepare for it, not with fear, but with respect. For them, death isn't a thief. It's a doorway, and only those with the right energy can walk through it awake. You don't raise your vibration with trendy mantras or shallow affirmations. You do it by living your truth fully. That means breaking down the false self built from fear, comparison, shame, and survival. It means being honest about your energy, your beliefs, your habits. Are these really yours? Or were they handed to you by a system designed to keep you distracted and obedient? The path of the initiate isn't about being perfect, it's about integrity. Every thought, every word, every choice either lifts you closer to your higher self or pulls you back into old patterns. That's what ancient initiation was really about. Not showy rituals or performances, but transformation through fire. The fire of inner truth. Facing your shadows, owning the parts of yourself you were taught to hide. The initiate had to die before they died, so when the body finally falls away, the soul doesn't panic. It remembers. And because it remembers, it doesn't wander. It chooses. That's what makes immortality possible. Not breaking life's laws, but mastering them. And it's not just about where you go after death. It's about who you become while you live. When you walk this path, people feel your presence. Your energy fills the room before you say a word. You become less reactive, less easy to control. You start hearing the subtle truth beneath people's words, behind the noise. Your intuition sharpens. Your dreams feel more real than waking life. You notice meaningful coincidences, not as accidents, but as messages. You become a bridge between the seen and unseen. People notice it, even if they can't explain why. But this path isn't glamorous or easy. It will break you open, strip you down, demand you leave behind everything you once used to define yourself. But in letting go, something sacred shows up. Not something new, but something ancient. Something you carried before this life. Something that keeps whispering in your quiet moments. You are divine. You are eternal. You're here not just to survive, but to wake up. The initiate doesn't run from life. They dive into it fully. Eyes open, heart clear, spirit steady. They see their body as a vehicle, their mind as a tool, and their soul as the true guide. They stop chasing purpose outside themselves and start living it. Because purpose isn't out there. It's in how you live, how you love, how you choose truth over comfort again and again. And this isn't just for wise sages or mystics in temples. It's for you, right here, right now. Every moment is a test. Every choice is a door. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing. Willing to listen, willing to question, willing to rise. The path of the initiate was never closed. It was just forgotten. Now that you've found it again, the real question is, will you walk it? Something is stirring. You can feel it. People everywhere are starting to question the stories they were told. They're looking deeper, listening closer, trusting their gut more than institutions. The veil hiding this knowledge is lifting, not because a few discovered it, but because many are remembering. And when enough souls remember, something ancient comes back to life. This isn't just a personal journey. It's a collective awakening, a return to the Atlantean way, a state where technology, spirituality, and consciousness work together, not against each other. You're not the only one who feels like this world doesn't make sense, like the systems are broken, like the answers you've been given don't really answer your real questions. That discomfort, that feeling of being disconnected, that's a sign something deeper is waking up inside you. You're not lost, you're being called. Called to break the trance, to realign, to remember the blueprint humanity once lived by before everything got twisted. This is how the Atlantean age began, not with control, but with awareness. Their society wasn't perfect, but it was built on values we've forgotten. They knew the body was sacred, that vibration could heal, and intention could shape reality. They honored nature's cycles, built with sacred geometry, and trained their minds to connect with higher realms. That's not fantasy, that's ancient memory. A time when the line between spirit and science was thin, when the soul was honored as powerful and immortality wasn't a myth, but a practice. That memory lives in your cells, in your dreams, in that moment of recognition when something skips logic and hits your heart directly. That's not nostalgia, that's remembering. You don't need to rebuild Atlantis in stone. You need to rebuild it in consciousness. Because Atlantis wasn't just a place. It was a frequency, a way of being, a state where humanity was in harmony with itself and the universe. And it's coming back, not as history repeating, but as wisdom rising again. You can already see it. People leaving behind lives that don't fit anymore, choosing healing over endless hustle, seeking teachers who empower instead of demanding worship, building communities based on awareness, not rules. We're rediscovering what it means to live in resonance. And resonance, that's the language of the soul. This shift won't be announced on the news. Governments won't broadcast it. Institutions won't validate it. Instead, it will happen quietly but powerfully. In conversations, choices, and the subtle energy exchanged between awakened hearts. That's how the Atlantean mind spreads. Not by force, but by frequency. You're not here to convince the world. You're here to be a living example of what's possible. When you remember who you really are, step by step, the illusion starts to crack. The systems built on fear begin to fall apart, not through violence, but because they no longer matter. What once controlled you loses power when you stop resonating with it. And when that happens in millions of people's minds, the whole collective energy shifts. That's how timelines change. That's how old ways collapse. Not with noise, but with knowing. You were never alone in your remembering. The fact that you're here, drawn to these ideas and forgotten truths, proves something inside you is syncing up with the collective awakening. This is what the ancients predicted. Not the end of the world, but the end of the illusion. And beyond the illusion is the truth. You are energy, eternal and always growing. Death is just a veil, not the final verdict. Immortality isn't a fantasy, it's your birthright if you choose to remember. You don't have to shout, you don't have to fight, you just need to be fully, unapologetically, authentically you. The more you live your truth, the more you make room for others to do the same. When enough of us hold that energy, the world changes. Not because we force it, but because we remember how. They told you immortality was just a myth, that eternal life only exists in stories and fairy tales. That death is the final boundary, something nobody can escape. But what they never told you is that immortality isn't about running from death. It's about taking back your power over it. You don't need to live forever in a body to be immortal. You just need to stop identifying with what dies. The real you, the soul, the essence, the awareness behind your thoughts, was never born and will never end. It just shifts, grows, and remembers. What separates the mortal from the immortal isn't biology, it's awareness. Most people live and die without ever knowing who they truly are. They drift through life, reacting, obeying, surviving, stuck in roles they never chose and beliefs they never questioned. But those who wake up, who remember, start to live differently. They stop being afraid. They see death not as a shadow, but as a mirror. Not a thief, but a teacher. They realize true immortality isn't about escaping life's cycle. It's about mastering it. And that mastery doesn't come from denial or avoidance. It comes from alignment. You align your thoughts, actions, and energy with the truth of who you are. You stop chasing approval, possessions, and status. Instead, you cultivate presence, integrity, and vibration. You begin to live from your soul outward, not from your ego inward. And as you do, something changes. You remember you were never here to fit in, perform, or collect things. You were here to grow, express, and live a higher knowing beyond words and logic. Thoth didn't promise an easy life. He promised a life of remembering. When you remember your divine nature and walk the initiate's path, death touches you differently. You face it with open eyes. You know what's on the other side isn't judgment or nothingness, but continuation, growth, a new chapter in an endless story. And that knowing changes everything. You stop fearing the end, so you stop wasting your beginning. You speak your truth because you're no longer afraid of being rejected. You take risks because you're not obsessed with safety. You choose authenticity over approval, growth over comfort, and alignment over applause. You live not just to survive, but to expand. That's what immortality really is. Not running from death, but fully and fearlessly embracing life. This knowledge has always been here, hidden in temples, written in symbols, whispered in dreams, kept by initiates, buried by empires, found again by seekers. Now it's in your hands. You can choose to forget it, or you can choose to live it. If you've made it this far, don't stop now. Sign up for our free newsletter, Insights Academy, linked below. Some truths are too powerful for just a video. You'll also get a copy of the Kybellion while it's still available. You already carry the code inside you. You don't need permission. You don't need to wait. The soul doesn't work on deadlines. It works on resonance. When it hears the truth, it knows. If your soul knows right now, it's time not to just believe, but to become. If this video spoke to you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."